Hey folks, Bryon Howard here. On today's show, I have a good friend, Myron Tetreault. He's a longtime training friend of ours. We still do a lot of running, biking, swimming, mostly running and swimming these days with Myron. But Myron and I had just spent a couple of weeks trekking with our wives and another friend, Bruce, to Everest Base Camp. And Myron's a longtime friend. He's a very strong community advocate. He has a real love for and passion for Alberta and Calgary and everything around this area of the world. A beautiful family. And without further ado, here's our conversation with Myron, his involvement in sort of a startup career as a young lawyer to sort of more into business as a real estate guy. And he's done a lot of work with the Weber Academy and lots of other organizations around. Endurance athlete, and enjoy this show with Myron. Hey friends, welcome to another edition. It's been a while of Calgary Living, Real Estate Lifestyle. Today I have a good friend, a good training buddy, we have a similar coach in critical speed, Myron Tetreault. Myron, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bryon. It's an honor and a privilege.
Myron, I was telling Shirley just 10 minutes ago how she asked me how my Zoom appointments went this afternoon, and I said, well, XYZ happened, and now I'm meeting Myron at 10 minutes, and she goes, who's Myron? I go, well, he went to Nepal with us. And she goes, I often think of Myron and his nice smile.
Well, I'm glad I left such an impression.
And then she said, I miss them. And she goes, and I go, Myron's nice smile. And she goes, yeah, especially when his daughter would call. I thought that was so nice because I actually remarked that as well. When Pascal would call while you and I were recently in Nepal together, trekking, and your daughter, who's very close, would call, and man, Myron just turned into this sponge of kindness and niceness. Not that you aren't all the time anyway. Myron, again, thanks for being on the show. We just got back from Nepal, you and I.
We did. We had a wonderful trip with our wives and another friend, Bruce, hiking up to Everest Base Camp, and it was fantastic.
We'll have to we'll dig down a little bit on how that all happened. But Myron, this is a show on Calgary Living a little bit, and you've been in Calgary a long time. Can you tell us a little bit about how you happened to land in Calgary? I think there was twice that you've landed in Calgary.
Sure. Well, I was born in Calgary. My father was a high school teacher at St. Francis High School years ago. And so I was born here. We lived here up until I was about 8 years old, other than 1 year when we went, my dad took a sabbatical for a year, and we lived in Aix-en-Provence, France, which is where I did my kindergarten. We came back to Calgary, and then when I was in grade 3, my father got a job in Saskatchewan, and we moved out there. And so I lived in Regina from the age of 8 up until the end of high school. Then I went to university in Ottawa. I did a business degree there. Took a year off, went traveling, did 3 years of law school in Saskatoon. And then when I graduated, decided I wanted to be back in Calgary and moved here in 1992. And I've been here since then. And
so in 1992, and was your family here when you came back?
They were not. They stayed in Saskatchewan.
Okay, good. And it seems to me that and how did you decide Calgary? Here you're I guess actually had you already met your wife at that in U of Ottawa?
I had not. Actually, that's a longer story. We were actually in grade 1 and 2 together here in Calgary, but we only met a few years after I'd moved back to Calgary. She was a lawyer in town as well. But no, I moved here because I was interested in business and initially in the area of business law. And I felt that Calgary was a good place for that, with the number of head offices, with a very entrepreneurial feel to the city. I thought it would be a good place for me to launch a career.
Did when you think back to that time, 1992, I graduated from university in 1990, at that time, in my perspective, I was studying recreation, so we're certainly coming from different backgrounds and mindsets probably at the time. There wasn't really any work. In 92, there'd be a little bit more work. I mean, in actually Canada Y, my grad class, like there was like just no jobs for, it's municipal recreation is kind of what we were trained for. How about it you in 1992? Was Vancouver, was Toronto other options, or what, like why did you pick Calgary in the end? Was it the Alberta advantage certainly didn't exist at that time, I don't think, did it?
I was interested in Calgary, partly from having fond memories of when I was younger, and also, when I was in law school, the law firms would come to recruit when we were in second year. I did interviews with some firms in Calgary, and I actually had a job lined up, prior to graduating from law school. So came out here to start that job with a law firm called Bennett Jones. And they had an active, busy practice, and it was an opportunity for me to jump in to work with some intelligent people on some very interesting files. I enjoyed it and kind of jumped right into it when I got here.
Cool, very cool. And tell us a little bit about, I know you're very involved in the mountains and the outdoors at that time, like most of the 90s. And tell us about some of your first real estate decisions in Calgary. Where did you end up living when you moved here in 92? Was it the neighborhood that you, like your early life part? Or how did you choose that neighborhood coming out of law school from Ottawa?
Coming out of university, I did not have the funds to buy a house. I ended up renting a townhouse with 3 roommates who were friends from law school. We lived up near the Shaganappy Golf Course, and then eventually I purchased a house with a roommate. And then when I got married, my wife and I bought a house in Elbow Park, and that's where our first house was.
Oh, very nice. And here, Shaganappy. So you've always lived south of the Bow River?
Yes.
Is there a reason? I mean, do you think there's any truth in Calgarians either live on the north of the Bow River or the south of the Bow River? And that tends to be where their life is.
Yeah, I guess I should back up from that. We did live in Varsity Acres when I was younger.
I thought that. Yeah.
Yes. And then so for a short period of time when I had a roommate, we lived north of the river as well. But for a long time, I have been south. I don't necessarily see that as the big divider for me. But Elbow Park was a great neighborhood for us. It was, inner city, close to downtown, and work was an important thing at that time, and liked that neighborhood. And then we eventually, later on, once we had our third child and we needed a little bit more space, we moved into Discovery Ridge and a little bit further in the southwest. And that was a nice neighborhood for many years. We just recently sold there, but lived there for a long time. Enjoyed Griffith Woods. It's very easy access to Bragg Creek and to the mountains, and so a nice family-friendly neighborhood.
What was it like moving from an older inner city neighborhood to Discovery Ridge? I think you, as I remember, you moved there in, I think, 2007, and the community was fairly new. I think 2004, and stuff was being built up. Well, how was that in terms of an adjustment or transition? Obviously, lots of families and young kids, which your kids were in that age.
Yeah, it was very much more suburban than, of course, the other area. And we, I guess, liked it. There was less traffic. There were a lot of young kids on the street that we lived on. And so, our kids developed friends in the neighborhood. And as I mentioned, the recreational aspect, it was a really good spot for running and for cycling in the areas around there, and then easy access to the mountains, which we often went to on the weekends.
Nice. Myron, obviously, I'm very interested in real estate. You have some interesting real estate stories. Can you tell us a little bit about maybe some of your first investments in downtown Calgary? Parking lots, just like shocking a little bit. And actually relating that to the boom and bust economy that we have in Calgary. Can you kind of touch base on those 2 points and maybe around the same story, I suppose, as I understand it, and you're telling me in Nepal?
Yeah, so real estate has been a big part of my business career. When I left the practice of law in 1998, I went into business full time and in a number of areas. And one of the aspects that I've devoted a lot of energy in is in the real estate side. And so I have a a real estate company called Fitzroy Developments with two business partners that we started back in 2003. And our first purchase was a package of 6 parking lots. In-Park at the time had been sold to a private equity group, and they were moving away from ownership of their parking lots to just simply managing them, managing the lots. And so they put these up for sale. We bid on it. We were successful. We were able to renegotiate the parking contracts, which bumped the income on them. And our plan was to hold them for indefinitely as a source of income. And then I guess shortly after that, things started picking up with the development in the areas where they were. We had parking lots in Calgary, Edmonton, and Regina. And over the course of the next number of years, we had opportunities to sell them not as parking lots, but as development sites into other projects. And that was really what sort of gave us a base of capital to expand into other areas of real estate.
And what do you like most about Calgary?
Well, definitely I think it's a great place to do business. I mentioned before, there's a number of head offices here. There, the downtown core, and, obviously with some boom and bust, but generally has been a very vibrant place to work. There is an entrepreneurial spirit, unlike other cities where there tends to be more generational wealth. And here, I think a lot of people are entrepreneurs, people who came from humble beginnings and moved here, worked hard, and were successful. And I liked that spirit in Calgary. And so as part of that, I guess also met my wife here and built our family and really enjoy the community. I'm fortunate to have lots of great friends, and that's been a big part of Calgary as well. The area is beautiful. I mean, our kids were big into downhill ski racing. We spent a lot of time on the mountains doing that. And as you know, I've got into the triathlons and trail running, and Calgary is an absolutely fantastic place for that. Both within the city, you have areas like Fish Creek, you have Nose Hill, even Griffith Woods, which was near our place. Along the river downtown, there's so many great running paths within the city. And then you're just a short drive away to Bragg Creek, Canmore, to Banff, and those areas where there's just a world of possibilities of places to go running and other types of recreation.
Exactly. Myron, something about that I actually, one of the things I love about Calgary is actually is like the sport, the health, the wellness, the outdoors kind of thing. But the other kind of cool thing that I kind of remark on, there's a lot of fast guys and women, but in our age group, I mean, we're kind of like we like between 40 and 60. Any comment on that? I mean, you're a big part of that group. Well, I'm thinking specifically about the the Bow Valley Harriers.
Correct.
And I mean, it's just like, it's kind of fascinating at how many, maybe amateur kind of Canadian titles that a lot of our colleagues, similar age, have. And can you just talk a little bit on that, maybe? I mean, I know you're a big part of that community and have lots of friends, from Ken Young to Jody to Coach Cal Zarowski.
Yeah, I think Calgary, there's definitely a part of the community that has this culture of sport. And I think a number of reasons, certainly the history of the 1988 Olympics and some of the legacy facilities that were left here from that. Lots of great training places in Calgary. And I don't know, I think that young entrepreneurial spirit translated also into people that want to challenge themselves in other ways. And we see that in Calgary with a number of sports that have their head offices for the sports associations here, and you have a number of Olympic athletes, training in, particularly winter sports, in that Canmore, Calgary area, and a number of schools that are dedicated to that. So I think there's some support for the sport, and I think communities build on themselves. So when you have a core of people that are doing it, it attracts other people, and I think we're fortunate to have just a really great group of people in that running, swimming, triathlon community in Calgary that you're also part of. That it makes it fun to be part of.
Yeah, it's really about, I mean, we do these things, but it's actually about the people we do it with, and we have these experiences. But yeah, I just love that about where we live. Myron, I can't help. I want to talk a little bit maybe about your own kids. Tell us about your kids, and maybe can relate it a little bit to, I guess, choosing their schools in later life and all your involvement with Weber Academy and You've been very involved but like really helped not only, I mean, that's one group of organization that I know of that you've helped. But in terms of land acquisition and development, tell us a little bit about, well, maybe your kids and the school they went to, and what's going on with what's exciting about all that land stuff that you've done, like completely unrelated to anything we've already spoke about.
Yeah. Well, I have 4 kids, 3 boys and a girl. Our youngest is a daughter, and she just graduated from high school. She's off at University in Concordia. Our oldest son graduated from University of Calgary with a mechanical engineering degree, and my second son is studying accounting, and the third son is studying finance. They're both in Calgary here as well. So they were active growing up as well, involved with a lot of sports. They did swimming and karate and other things when they were younger. And then all 4 of them did ski racing. We spent a lot of time out in the Canmore area. Our home club was the Bow Valley club out of Norquay, Banff Alpine Racers. And so we spent a lot of years taking our kids out there with ski racing, and they've stayed active in those kinds of things. When both my wife and I come from a French background, so when the kids were younger, we sent them to the Catholic Francophone school called St. Margaret Bourgeois, and they went there up until about the grade 8. It varied a little bit by kid, and then they went to high school and at Weber Academy. They graduated from there. Now, Weber Academy is a school that was founded by my uncle Neil Weber, and when it was being founded, I was working as a lawyer at the time, and I helped him with the establishment of that school and sat on the board of the school itself for about 20 years. And then a few years ago, we broke it into 2 pieces. We established an endowment for the school, and I chair that endowment. So I've spent lots of time over the years working with them. And I remember early on when we started the school, the first 3 years, we rented a facility in North Calgary, just off of Centre Street. And we quickly outgrew that space. And so we were looking for an area, and we did a lot of studies of what would be the right spot for a new private school. And we ended up choosing Southwest Calgary, and we had an opportunity to buy 42 acres of land just to the west of the West Side Recreation Center there and near the Aspen area. But at the time, it was outside of the city limits. It was farmland, and of course, over the last 20 plus years, 25 years, I guess, things have grown up around there, and it's now part of a vibrant community. But we were very fortunate to acquire that land. And then over the course of its existence, they've expanded the facilities there a number of times. It started with the main school, and then we added a kinder center. And then the next wave, I think we added a high school building. And then we also finally added a performing arts theater. And so it's a wonderful school with great facilities, and they built a science center there for the high school kids as well. And then as we looked towards the future, a few years ago, we wanted to see if there was a piece of land that we could buy in Springbank that would allow us to expand the school in the future. And we were looking for a smaller piece of land, but as it turned out, we had an opportunity to buy a bigger piece of land, and took advantage of that. And so the school right now is in the process of, on that land, building out an athletic park that will host, it already hosts a baseball club, but will also be a great facility for the neighborhood and the area as well. And so the initial phase of that athletic park involves 4 baseball diamonds, 2 soccer fields, and a 50,000 square foot field house. And the field house will have batting cages, pitching analysis, weight rooms, and then the top floor will be adding some multi-purpose rooms, including a robotics lab for the high school. So we're very excited about that, and that's being in the construction phase over the last year or 2 here, and we're getting just close to finishing it now. The 2 baseball diamonds are finished, and the field house will be officially open sometime in a few months.
It's cool to me how involved you are in really number of projects, but community. I remember you telling me actually maybe sort of relating a little bit back to community, like thinking local and acting global, or being somewhat global as well. You told me a little bit of years ago, your dad was a teacher. I think 10 years or so ago, you and your dad, for whatever reason, decided to go to Nepal. And I think you built a school, or and have been supporting books, or in Nepal. Tell us a little bit about your involvement maybe, internationally, and how you're giving back, to communities like that one.
Well, you know way too much about me, Bryon. Uh,
I know
and,
some about you. I just like bits and pieces.
as you mentioned, we have been involved in some community activities, and a few years ago, my wife and I set up a foundation. And but prior to that, with my business partners from our real estate company, we had decided to do some charitable activities, and we partnered up with a charity out of San Francisco called Room to Read. That back in that time was building schools and libraries around the world, and they actually started in Nepal. And their founder was a fellow named John Wood, who had a chance to meet, and just felt a lot of kinship with him. We had some similarities in our story. We had both been backpacking in Nepal when we were university, or earlier in our life, I guess, and saw that some of the needs over there. And so we, through Room to Read, decided to build a school there in 2009, and we dedicated it to our parents. And so for me, it was a trip that I did with my father, where we went to the opening of that school, and it was just a great bonding trip, and an opportunity for us to share that together.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then you ended up flying into Lukla, I believe, and doing a trek with your dad to Namche Bazaar.
Correct. Yeah. We covered part of the same ground on our recent trip there.
Right. I was going to say, which are very familiar to me all of a sudden. Myron, let's talk a little bit about, and let our audience know a little bit about how how you happened, you and Catherine, and then how I happened to, what's your perspective? How did Shirley and I and Bruce happen to come along with you guys to Nepal? Let's just share that from your perspective.
Sure. I mean, of course, you and I have known each other for over 10 years. As you mentioned at the opening of the show, we have a common coach, Cal's rescue training with a group called Critical Speed. And so we've known each other from that. And then when we recently decided to make the move to sell our house in Calgary, we hired you as our real estate agent. And it was a tour de force performance where everything just went absolutely perfectly in terms of how you'd want a sale to go. I think we picked the right timing. We had spoken probably 6 months in advance with the idea that we had planned to sell our house. And so we had met with my wife and I, and we talked through what the market looked like and some of the things that we could do to prepare our house for that sale. And then in the lead up to it, before we actually did the listing, of course, we completed some of those things, and then we prepped the market a little bit by speaking to some of the agents in the neighborhood. It was a time where there was quite a bit of demand. It was a little bit before the busier spring season, and we thought we would get ahead of that. And we let people know that this was going to come up for sale. And it was really remarkable the way it played out. I mean, we listed that house at, I think, 7 p.m. on a Monday. And by 7:30, you had 6 or 7 calls with several of them insisting on seeing the house that night. There were a few showings on the very first evening. We got immediately an unconditional offer above list price. Asked them to leave it open for 24 hours, and then we looped back with everyone else that expressed interest. And it turned into a bidding war amongst some parties that really wanted the house. And eventually, within 24 hours, we accepted an offer well above list, unconditional. So we were just thrilled with the way that happened. And so to celebrate our successful transaction, Catherine and I invited you and Shirley to go for a hike. So I can't remember which hike we did, but we went out to somewhere around Canmore, and you came in and visited us here in Canmore, went for a hike, and we were telling you about our plans to go hiking in Nepal, and that we were, open to having some people join us. And you guys immediately jumped on that. I think within a few days said, we're in. And we finished off the planning of that trip, and then ended up inviting your friend Bruce. And 6 months later, I guess, we did our trip.
Yeah, it's such an interesting, and thank you for sharing the story about our great work in getting your home sold. And that wasn't where I really was going with it, but I am so glad you told everybody, and most every transaction I do is just like that one.
I had to share that story because you can't get much better success than that in the sale of a house.
I remember sitting with you and Catherine in Canmore after our hike, and I think that was when you told me you were going to Nepal. And I was like, I kind of looked across the table, and I was like, just like, well, can I come or can we come? I kind of said, I think it was like, I don't think I waited for your invitation. And it was just kind of like, well, what is like, well, how are you doing that? And you're like, yeah, we kind of self-organized it. You're using a Nepalese supplier through a, contact of yours who had, summited Everest in the late 90s, I believe. And like, it seemed quite affordable and like in terms of the, what we were getting. And so, yeah, Shirley and I think immediately said yes. And then I had to like, kind of push Shirley a little bit, just a little bit, because she's not terribly really interested in Southeast Asia as a Canadian. And her background is like, she loves Canada and our climate, and, Southeast Asia kind of scares her a little bit, but what a great opportunity. And actually, I kind of want to relate it a little bit to you as a planner and you and Catherine as planners. And I find I'm finding, like, just personally later as I become, the age we're at, I'm really starting to realize I'm not a good planner. I'm not a great planner at this kind of activity. So I really need like a friend like you who's doing this. And then I'm like, I think I'm a willing and active and good participant. Any thoughts on that, Myron? Why are you a good planner?
Well, I don't know. I would say actually your friend or our friend Bruce put us all to shame in that regard once he jumped on board. I don't think he'd mind me sharing that our Nepalese guide in a friendly way dubbed him Mr. Many Emails.
Right. Bruce of many emails, yeah.
Yes, but no, I think I was fortunate that I had been there before, so I had some familiarity with the country. I was able to get a contact through a friend who had been there, as you mentioned, and then the group there helped us plan the trip. And I think traveling has been a big part of my life right from when I was young. Playing sports as a kid, did some traveling, and then in university had an opportunity to do a couple of longer backpacking trips in university. And through that have continued that love of travel. And so once you've done that a little bit, you think of the things you need to plan in order to do those trips. And we just put that together for Nepal, and everything worked out really well. We're very, awesome. Very fortunate with some of the decisions we made to be able to get in to the Everest region, even though the weather was not great. And it just turned out as expected, and we had a great trip.
Had a great trip. Hey, Myron, that leads me again to like so when I was a young high school student, I was very involved with the International Red Cross, and in 1985 was the year I was graduating from high school, probably yours as well, I think. We're similar age. And then and that year, I don't know if you remember, was International Year of the Youth. And there was a lot of slogan, especially around the Red Cross that I was involved in. It was think global, act local. And so and to me is a bit of a buzzword, and has been a bit of a buzzword, for years. And I think a lot of people talk about that, about thinking global and acting, local. But I think I actually just want to commend you on being that person who is doing that. And so what was so great about traveling with you folks is to Nepal was your involvement in like the community locally. You and Catherine braved a wicked rainstorm. Thank God you're still with us in some ways, and a long drive to visit the school that your family, had helped, and you had helped build in 2009. But then, we've set out with you. We sought out opportunities in Namche Bazaar, particularly to visit schools, and in Kumjung with the Hillary Mallory school. I don't know, I was just so impressed with your ability to want to pick a project. And I hear about lots of people doing that, but you're actually really taking action steps towards that. Can you share a little bit about maybe how you choose to how it came about that we visited a small school and we saw what we saw, and we're considering doing some sort of activity in help with that school, and how, if we do, how it will take place, which is also, you're not just throwing money at something, which is great too. Can you share a little bit?
Yeah, well, thanks for the kind words. I think my view is if you're visiting some of these places, that it's a good idea to hopefully contribute back to those places that we're able to get some pleasure from. And Nepal's a country I've now been to 3 times. I have a real soft spot for it. It's a wonderful place to visit. And in the earlier trip, and through some of the other things that we've done with our foundation, we met a lady named Frances Klatzel, who's from Canmore, who's lived in Nepal for a number of years and has set up a charity there. And so at the time we built that school, we were involved with helping Frances with some programs that she did, some microcredit programs and some educational support programs in Kathmandu itself. And so when we were heading back there, I reached out to Frances, and we were able to have dinner. And then, of course, we had a coffee with you and Shirley as well, just brainstorming on some ideas for some projects. And so it was at the top of my mind as we were doing our trek to look out for things. And she had introduced us virtually, and then we were able to meet with a fellow in Namche Bazaar who, multi-generational family there that's quite active there, and he was able to let us see the school and tell us about some of the needs in that community and a bit of the history of how things had developed with the climbing industry and the trekking and how that's affected the community around there. And so we're looking to do something where it wasn't just a gift, but it was more a partnership with people within the community, and asked this fellow as well about his ideas on how to do that. And he came up with some good suggestions for potential projects that would involve, the local youth group, the women's group in the community, would involve some contribution from the locals, and then some contribution for us. And then Frances would oversee the project to help improve things at the school there. So it's still in the planning stages right now. We're waiting for a proposal, but it's great to be able to explore those things and see if we can find a way to get back to that place that we were able to visit.
I love it. As we were planning or preparing to go to Nepal, Shirley and I, a week or 10 days prior, it occurred to us, well, let's bring some pencils or sticklers or a couple of books to hand out at schools and do our part. And we didn't end up doing that, but no, I just want to commend you on your involvement and traveling into these third world countries that have a soft spot for you, and looking for opportunities to maybe build or support awesome work. Myron, in respect of our audience, maybe we'll kind of clean this up or finish this up shortly. I guess it seems to me that well, actually, 2 questions for you, maybe kind of related as we come to a close. About your career, it seems to me that you've landed in the perfect career for yourself and have done great. But if you had to choose a different career, what would it be? Let me ask you that. And then also maybe related to that, what advice would you give your younger self?
Deep questions. I mean, I'm happy with the path that my career has taken. I come from a family of teachers, and I think I could have easily pursued that as a career as well. It's also an important way. That could have been an alternate path. I think I was interested in business from a very young age. Even in high school, it was something that I read about and that I wanted to get involved in, but I didn't. It took me a while to find the right path to get into it. And when I was at university, one of my summer jobs was running a student painting business. That was sort of my first taste of the entrepreneurialism. And I think I went into law really as a pathway into business. Mm-hmm. And it allowed me to then move into the more entrepreneurial things that I've done since then. If I were to give some advice to a younger self, I'd suggest that the most important thing is community and relationships. And so much of the enjoyment I've got out of my career and a lot of the success as well has been able to find mentors who have been very helpful to me, and also to build solid relationships with business partners and others. So taking that time to get to know people, and it was one of the shifts from law, where you come from a business where you judge your time in 0.1 increments of an hour, and so your productivity is measured on how much you're actually sitting there working. Right. And when I left the practice of law, I think it took me a while to shift into that mode that a lot of what you need to do is around the strategic thinking and and building those relationships and getting out and being part of doing things. And that is very much part of your work is that. And that's also one of the things you get pleasure out of is because of those relationships. So that would be one thing.
Awesome. No, appreciate you sharing that. That's great. Myron, winding up here, is there any last ask that you would have of our audience, like anything at all that that you'd like to share with the audience, or maybe have an ask of the audience?
Don't really have an ask, but it was a pleasure chatting with you, Bryon. I always like getting together with you and being training partners as well, and through the trip, deepening our friendship with you and Shirley as well through that was great.
It was fantastic. Well, listen, thanks so much for being a guest on the show. We will obviously and continuously be keeping in touch. And well, until next time, until the conversation continues, thanks once again. Namaste.
Thanks, Bryon.
Well, that was a fun conversation with old friend Myron. You know, I really love what Myron's. He's a quiet kind of thing. I've pulled a lot of that information out of him over a lot of years and was able to share it with you guys, the listeners. He divulged that he didn't really know or want or need. He didn't think that I knew so much about him. That was fun. Myron is a real community guy, and the idea around that slogan that was a lot, really seemed to me it was overused in the 80s as a bit of a cliche. You know, I was a think global, act local. More than anyone I know, Myron lives it. Well, folks, thanks for listening, tuning into the show. If you know somebody who would like to be on the show, Calgary Living, Real Estate and Lifestyle, I would love your suggestions. Please reach out. You know how to find me. Of course, we will have show notes in the notes, and look for that. Reach out anytime. BH out.